In the fog-choked alleys of 1932 Soho, a scream shattered the night's jazz-laced hum. Victor Beaumont, avant-garde artist, lay dead in his loft, a palette knife plunged into his throat, blood pooling like vermilion on his unfinished canvas, a veiled woman's haunting portrait. Hercule Poirot, summoned by Inspector Japp, surveyed the scene, his gray cells sparking. "Mon Dieu! A murder most deliberate," he murmured. Suspects swirled. Jealous lover, rival painter, shady dealer, betrayed sculptor. Lavender scent lingered. A clue or deception? As a shadow fled into the mist, Poirot vowed to unravel the killer's artful deceit. Chapter 1. The Canvas of Death. The fog clung to Soho's cobblestones like a jealous lover, wrapping the narrow streets of London in a shroud of mystery. It was the winter of 1932, and the air carried the sharp bite of frost mingled with the faint perfume of turpentine and cigarette smoke drifting from hidden jazz clubs. In the heart of this bohemian enclave, where artists and dreamers carved their visions from the chaos of the night, a scream shattered the stillness. It came from the top floor of a crumbling Georgian townhouse, its weathered facade barely concealing the vibrant chaos within. The building, known as the Atelier Rouge, was a haven for painters, sculptors, and poets, a place where genius and madness danced a delicate waltz. Tonight, that dance had turned deadly. Inside the loft of Victor Beaumont, a painter whose avant-garde portraits had set London's high society ablaze with both admiration and scandal, a scene of horror unfolded. The studio was a cavern of creativity, its high ceilings draped with shadows cast by flickering gas lamps. Canvases leaned against every wall, some vibrant with color, others abandoned in despair. Paint tubes, brushes, and palettes littered the floor, a testament to Beaumont's relentless pursuit of perfection. But now, the artist himself lay sprawled across his easel, his once vibrant eyes frozen in a stare of eternal shock. A palette knife, its blade gleaming with cruel precision, protruded from his throat. Crimson blood, stark against the pale skin of his neck, had spilled across the canvas beneath him. Pool cadence of French-accented English. "This is no accident of passion. This is a murder most calculated." The words hung in the air, heavy with certainty, as he adjusted his immaculate Homburg hat and approached the body. Inspector Japp, a stout man with a perpetually furrowed brow, stood near the corpse, his notebook clutched like a shield against the chaos. "Nasty business, Poirot," he said, his Cockney accent grounding the surreal scene. "Found him just like this not an hour ago. The landlady, Mrs. Tuttle, heard the scream and came running. Poor woman's in a right state downstairs." Japp gestured toward the open window, where the fog curled inward like ghostly fingers. "No sign of forced entry, but the safe over there's been tampered with. Could be a robbery gone wrong." Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of disagreement. "Non, mon ami," he said, kneeling beside Beaumont's body. "A thief does not pause to create such a composition." His gloved hand hovered over the palette knife, careful not to disturb it. The blade was buried deep, the wound precise, severing the carotid artery with surgical accuracy. The killer, he knew exactly where to strike. This is not the work of a common criminal, but of one with knowledge, perhaps of anatomy, or perhaps of art. His gaze drifted to the canvas, where the blood had begun to dry, mingling with the painted shadows of the mysterious woman. And this painting, it is no mere backdrop. It speaks, does it not? Japp grunted, unconvinced. "You and your fancies, Poirot. I say we round up the usual suspects. Artists round here are a shifty lot." But Poirot was already moving, his attention drawn to the room's occupants, a cast of characters as vivid and varied as the pigments on Beaumont's palette. The loft buzzed with tension, the air thick with unspoken accusations, and the faint scent of lavender, an anomaly in the studio's usual bouquet of linseed oil and turpentine. First among the suspects was Lydia Voss, Beaumont's muse and lover, a woman whose beauty was as volatile as the storms she inspired in his work. Pigment, his eyes burning with barely concealed rage. "Beaumont was a thief," he spat, his voice low and bitter. "That portrait, the one he died on, it was my idea, my composition. He stole it, like he stole everything else." Thorne claimed he had been at a gallery opening across town, surrounded by witnesses, but his trembling hand suggested otherwise. Poirot observed the artist's wrist, where a faint tattoo, a cryptic symbol, peeked from beneath his cuff. It was oddly familiar, though its significance eluded him for now. Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, entered with the swagger of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. His pinstriped suit was a stark contrast to the bohemian chaos, his silver hair gleaming under the lamplight. "Beaumont owed me a fortune," he admitted to Poirot over a cup of tepid tea, his tone clipped. "His paintings were my investment, but lately forgeries have flooded the market. His own, perhaps?" Hargrove's motive was clear. Financial ruin loomed if Beaumont's reputation faltered. He produced a telegram placing him in Paris the night before, verifiable by wire. But Poirot's mustache twitched. "Monsieur Hargrove, you deal in illusions," he said softly. "Is this telegram one?" The final suspect, Margot Leclerc, was a reclusive sculptor who occupied a neighboring studio. Her French accent was as thick as the fog outside, her hands dusted with clay from her latest work. "Victor was a thief of hearts and ideas," she whispered, her dark eyes haunted. "He promised me collaboration, then betrayed me." She claimed to have been working late, alone on a bust. But her strong hands, capable of wielding a knife, caught Poirot's attention. Her studio, he recalled, was just across the hall, close enough to hear, or cause, a scream. As Poirot sifted through the scene, he uncovered a hidden sketch beneath a pile of canvases. A blackmail note demanding £500, signed with the same cryptic symbol he had seen on Thorne's wrist. "Ah, the plot thickens," he mused, slipping the note into his pocket. Charged with questions. Who was the shadowy figure? What did the veiled woman in the portrait conceal? And why did the scent of lavender linger, like a ghost unwilling to depart? Poirot adjusted his gloves, his mind a whirl of possibilities. "The game, it has begun," he murmured, a faint smile curving his lips. "And Hercule Poirot shall play it to the end." Chapter 2. Shadows in the Studio. The fog outside the Atelier Rouge thickened, as if conspiring to cloak the secrets within Victor Beaumont's Soho loft. The gas lamps flickered, casting long, wavering shadows across the paint-splattered floorboards, where Hercule Poirot paced with the precision of a metronome. His patent leather shoes clicked softly, a rhythmic counterpoint to the distant wail of a saxophone drifting up from a basement jazz club. The air was heavy with the acrid tang of linseed oil, turpentine, and that persistent, elusive scent of lavender, which clung to the scene like an uninvited guest. The studio, a chaotic shrine to Beaumont's genius, was now a stage for murder, and Poirot, with his egg-shaped head and impeccably waxed moustache, was determined to unravel its script. Inspector Japp, his face etched with the weariness of too many late nights, stood near the tampered safe, his notebook open but neglected. "Looks like a robbery gone wrong, Poirot," he said, his Cockney accent blunt as a truncheon. "The safe's lock is scratched to bits. Someone was after something valuable. Maybe Beaumont caught them in the act, eh?" He gestured toward the heavy iron box in the corner, its door slightly ajar, revealing only a few scattered papers and a single gold coin, glinting mockingly in the lamplight. Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle rebuke to Japp's theory. "Non, mon ami," he replied, his voice a soft melody of French-accented English. "A thief does not pause to plunge a knife with such precision. Observe the wound." He knelt beside Beaumont's body, still sprawled across the easel, the palette knife embedded in his throat like a grotesque signature. The blood had congealed, its crimson stark against the canvas of the veiled woman, whose indistinct features seemed to shift in the flickering light. Beauty, marred only by the coal-smudged tear tracks beneath her eyes. She stood near a cluttered table, her emerald dress catching the light as she twisted a silk handkerchief in her hands. "Victor and I quarreled last night," she admitted, her voice husky, raw with emotion, or perhaps artifice. "He said my portraits were passé, that he needed fresh inspiration. It cut me deeply, Monsieur Poirot, but I would never harm him. I loved him." She paused, her gaze dropping to the floor. "After our argument, I went for a walk in Soho, alone. The fog was thick, the streets empty. I needed air." Poirot's green eyes narrowed, noting the faint tremor in her hands and the scent of lavender that enveloped her like a veil. "Mademoiselle Voss," he said, his tone gentle but probing. "This walk, it was late, no? And you saw no one. No one saw you." Lydia's lips parted, then closed, her silence louder than words. Poirot made a mental note of the lavender, the same scent he had detected near the palette knife. A coincidence, or a clue pointing to her guilt? His gray cells hummed, cataloging every detail. Next, he turned to Elias Thorne, the rival painter whose brooding intensity seemed to darken the room. Thorne leaned against a wall, his hands stained with indigo and ochre, his dark eyes smoldering with resentment. "Beaumont was a fraud," he spat, his voice low and venomous. "That portrait, the one he died on, it was my composition, my vision. He stole it, just as he stole my place in the galleries." Thorne's alibi was a gallery opening across town, where he claimed to have been surrounded by admirers and critics. "Ask anyone there," he said, but his trembling hands betrayed his bravado. Poirot's gaze lingered on the cryptic tattoo on Thorne's wrist, the same symbol as on the blackmail note he had found. "Monsieur Thorne," Poirot said softly, "your anger, it is a fire, but does it burn hot enough to kill?" Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, entered the interrogation with the confidence of a man accustomed to bending truth to his will. His pinstriped suit was a stark contrast to the studio's bohemian. "Thief," she whispered. "Not just of hearts, but of ideas. He promised me collaboration, a joint exhibition, but he used my designs for his own gain." She claimed to have been working late on a bust, alone, her alibi as solitary as her demeanor. Poirot noted her strong hands, capable of wielding a knife with the same precision she applied to her sculptures. "Madame Leclerc," he said, "your solitude, it is convenient, no? But perhaps too convenient." As Poirot moved through the loft, his attention was drawn to a pile of sketches near Beaumont's easel. Beneath a chaotic stack of charcoal drawings he found another clue, a torn glove, its fabric imbued with the same lavender scent. It was delicate, feminine, and matched the shade of Lydia's dress. He slipped it into his pocket, his mind racing. Was it hers, or another misdirection? Nearby he uncovered a journal, its pages filled with Beaumont's jagged handwriting. Entries spoke of jealousy, betrayal, and a ghost from the past haunting him. One page mentioned a debt to Hargrove, another a quarrel with Thorne, and a third hinted at a secret shared with Margot in Paris years ago. "The victim. He was no saint," Poirot murmured, his fingers tracing the words. The air grew heavier as the night deepened, the fog pressing against the windows like an eager spectator. Poirot's investigation was interrupted by a sudden crash from the rooftop above, a sharp clatter that sent Japp scrambling for his truncheon. "Someone's up there!" he barked, leading a charge to the attic stairs. Poirot followed, more measured, his mind already piecing together possibilities. The rooftop was empty, save for a toppled crate and a scattering of paint cans, their contents splattered like blood across the tiles. Footprints, faint in the frost, led to the edge and vanished. "The killer, perhaps, returning to cover their tracks?" Poirot mused aloud. But Japp shook his head. "Or just a stray cat, Poirot. You're jumping at shadows." Back in the loft, the suspects exchanged wary glances, their alibis fraying under Poirot's scrutiny. Lydia's lavender, Thorne's tattoo, Hargrove's dubious telegram, Margot's solitary corridor broke his reverie. He turned, his eyes sharp, but saw only darkness. "The game. It grows more intricate," he whispered, a spark of excitement in his voice. "But Hercule Poirot, he shall unravel it." Chapter 3. The Dealer's Gambit. The Atelier Rouge stood defiant against the Soho fog, its windows glowing like the eyes of a wary beast. Inside Victor Beaumont's loft, the air was thick with the ghosts of turpentine and betrayal, the gas lamps casting a jaundiced hue over the chaos of canvases and scattered brushes. Hercule Poirot, his silhouette compact yet commanding, moved through the studio with the grace of a dancer, his green eyes dissecting every detail. The scent of lavender lingered, a spectral thread weaving through the crime scene, teasing his senses as he pieced together the puzzle of Beaumont's murder. The palette knife, still embedded in the artist's throat, gleamed under the lamplight, a silent accusation against the gathered suspects. The unfinished portrait of the veiled woman watched over the scene, its shadowed features a cipher that Poirot was determined to crack. Inspector Japp, his patience fraying like an old canvas, stood by the tampered safe, his broad shoulders hunched. "I'm telling you, Poirot, it's the safe," he insisted, his Cockney burr rough with frustration. "Someone wanted what was inside. Money, jewels, maybe those fancy paintings. They got caught, panicked, and stuck Beaumont with that knife." He jabbed a finger toward the iron box, its scratched lock a testament to an interrupted theft. But Poirot, his mustache quivering with quiet dissent, shook his head. "Non, mon ami. The safe is but a stage prop, meant to divert us from the true drama. The wound, it is too precise, the motive too personal. We must look to the hearts of those who knew him." The suspects, a gallery of motives and secrets, hovered in the loft's periphery, their eyes darting like moths in a storm. Poirot's gray cells buzzed, cataloging their every gesture, their every word. He turned his attention to Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, who swept into the studio with the calculated charm of a man who sold dreams for a living. "Owed me a fortune," he admitted, his voice clipped. "His paintings were my investment, each one a gamble that paid handsomely until recently. Forgeries have flooded the market, diluting his value. If his reputation collapsed, so would my profits." He produced a telegram from his breast pocket, its edges crisp despite the late hour. "I was in Paris last night, negotiating a deal. This confirms it. You may verify with the telegraph office." Poirot's mustache twitched, a silent signal of skepticism. "A telegram? It is easily sent, easily falsified," he said softly. "You deal in illusions, Monsieur Hargrove. Is this one of them?" Hargrove's smile faltered, a crack in his facade, but he recovered quickly. "I deal in art, not lies. Beaumont's debts were real, but I had no reason to kill him. A dead artist paints no masterpieces." Poirot noted the dealer's composure, but also the faint sheen of sweat on his brow. A man with secrets, perhaps, but a murderer? The gray cells reserved judgment. Next, Poirot sought out Margot Leclerc, the reclusive sculptor whose studio across the hall was a fortress of clay and silence. She emerged reluctantly, her dark hair pulled back, her hands dusted with the fine white powder of her craft. Her French accent was thick, her words measured, as if each syllable were sculpted with care. "Victor was a thief," she said, her voice low, her eyes haunted by memories of Paris. "He promised me a partnership, a shared exhibition, but he used my designs, my ideas to fuel his own fame. He betrayed me, and I came to London to confront him." Her alibi was solitary. She had been working late, alone, on a bust of a grieving muse. Poirot observed her hands, strong, capable, the hands of an artist who could shape clay or wield a knife with equal precision. "Madame Leclerc," he said, "your solitude, it is a convenient shield. But did you step across the hall last night, perhaps to settle an old score?" Margot's gaze hardened, but her voice trembled. "I hated him, yes, but I did not kill."
Found a receipt for a painting sold to Hargrove, marked forgery, in Beaumont's own hand. The dealer's involvement grew murkier, his Paris alibi more suspect. The atmosphere in the loft grew taut as the suspects watched Poirot's methodical progress. Lydia Voss, her red hair a fiery halo, lingered near the portrait, her fingers tracing its frame as if seeking answers. Elias Thorne, his brooding intensity undimmed, sketched furiously in a corner, his eyes darting to Poirot with suspicion. Hargrove paced, his polished exterior fraying, while Margot retreated to her studio, her silence louder than words. Inspector Japp, growing impatient, muttered, "We need answers, Poirot, not more riddles." But Poirot, undeterred, approached the tampered safe, his gloved hands probing its scratched lock. Inside, he found only papers, contracts, IOUs, and a single photograph of a woman, her face obscured by shadow, eerily reminiscent of the portrait on the easel. "The safe, it tells us little," Poirot said, turning to Japp, "but the photograph, it speaks volumes. Who is she, this woman who haunts both life and canvas?" Japp shrugged, but Poirot's mind raced. Was she the veiled woman in the painting? A lover, a victim, or the killer herself? The lavender scent, the forged paintings, the blackmail note with Thorne's symbol, all swirled in his grey cells, forming a pattern yet to be fully revealed. As night deepened, the fog pressed closer, muffling the sounds of Soho's revelry. Poirot gathered the suspects, his presence commanding despite his small stature. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "each of you has a motive. Monsieur Hargrove, your greed. Madame Leclerc, your betrayal. Mademoiselle Voss, your passion. Monsieur Thorne, your envy. But the truth, it hides in the shadows of this studio." He paused, his eyes scanning their faces, "And I, Hercule Poirot, shall bring it to light." Suddenly, a faint whisper echoed from the corridor, a voice, low and urgent, speaking words too soft, his diminutive frame radiating authority. His green eyes, sharp as a falcon's, scanned the studio, lingering on the bloodied easel where Beaumont's body still lay, the palette knife a grim sentinel in his throat. The unfinished portrait of the veiled woman loomed above, its indistinct features a silent challenge to Poirot's grey cells. The murder was no mere act of violence. It was a composition, deliberate and intricate, and Poirot was determined to decipher its brushstrokes. Inspector Japp, his patience worn thin as the fog outside, hovered near the tampered safe, his notebook clutched like a lifeline. "We're getting nowhere, Poirot," he grumbled, his Cockney accent rough with exasperation. "The safe, the knife, that blasted lavender scent, it's all a muddle.
We need to shake this lot down and get answers." He gestured toward the suspects, who lingered in the loft like figures in the half-finished painting, their faces etched with fear, defiance, and secrets. But Poirot, his mustache twitching with quiet resolve, raised a gloved hand. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It requires time to breathe. The clues, they are here, hidden in the shadows of the past." Poirot's investigation led him to the loft's attic, a cramped space accessible by a narrow staircase behind a faded tapestry. The air was musty, thick with dust and the faint echo of lavender, as if the scent had followed him like a ghost. With Jap trailing reluctantly, Poirot unearthed a battered trunk, its lock rusted but intact. Inside he found a treasure trove of secrets, a bundle of letters tied with twine, their ink faded but legible. There were love notes from Lydia Voss, their passion stained with tear marks. Threats from Elias Thorne, scrawled in a furious hand. IOUs from Reginald Hargrove, each more desperate than the last. But one letter stood out, a missive from Margot Leclerc's Parisian days, accusing Beaumont of plagiarism that had shattered her career. "He stole my sculptures, my soul," it read, the words trembling with rage.
Legacy. Poirot's gaze lingered on her hands, strong and capable, the hands of an artist who could wield a knife as deftly as a chisel. "Your solitude last night, madame, it is convenient," he said. "You were so close, just across the hall. Did you hear the scream? Or perhaps cause it?" Margot's eyes flashed, but she held firm. "I was working, alone. Search my studio if you doubt me." Poirot nodded, noting the clay residue on her apron, a mirror to the traces found near the murder weapon. A clue, or a coincidence? His grey cells churned, weaving possibilities. Back in the loft, Lydia Voss intercepted him, her red hair a fiery cascade under the lamplight. "You're wasting time with Margot," she snapped, her voice sharp with desperation. "Victor's death, it's tied to that painting." She gestured toward the veiled woman's portrait, its shadowed eyes seeming to follow their every move. "He was obsessed with it, said it would be his masterpiece, but he wouldn't tell me who she was." Her fingers brushed the canvas, then recoiled as if burned. Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the faint scent of lavender emanating from her. "Mademoiselle Voss," he said, "this quarrel you had with Monsieur Beaumont, it was about this painting, no? Or perhaps about another woman?" Lydia's face paled, her kohl-rimmed eyes darting away. "We fought about art, about love, about everything," she admitted. "But I didn't kill him. I loved him, even when he broke my heart." Her voice cracked, and Poirot noted the torn glove he had found, its lavender scent matching her perfume. Was it hers, or a plant to incriminate her? Before he could press further, a commotion erupted. Elias Thorne, his brooding intensity boiling over, stormed toward them, his hands stained with fresh pigment. "You're all blind!" he shouted, his voice raw. "That painting, it's mine! Beaumont stole my vision, my soul!" Poirot raised a hand, calming the storm. "Monsieur Thorne, your passion, it is evident. But this symbol—" He produced the blackmail note. "Collect a debt. Beaumont's forgeries were ruining me. I confronted him, but I didn't kill him." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, monsieur, your name appears in his journal, linked to these forgeries. Were you his partner or his victim?" The tension in the loft was palpable, the suspects circling each other like wolves. Poirot returned to the easel, his fingers brushing the portrait's edge. The veiled woman's face, though indistinct, seemed to pulse with secrets. He noticed a faint smudge of paint, a color not used elsewhere in the studio, vermilion, vibrant and fresh, as if applied just before the murder. "This painting," he said, almost to himself. "It is the heart of the mystery. But whose heart does it reveal?" As the night wore on, the fog outside seemed to seep into the loft, muffling the sounds of Soho's revelry. Poirot gathered the suspects, his voice cutting through the haze. "Mes amis, the past, it whispers to us. Letters of betrayal, threats of vengeance, debts unpaid. Each of you is bound to Victor Beaumont by a chain of motive. But the killer, they have left their mark." He held up the lavender-scented glove, watching their reactions. Lydia's breath hitched, Margot's hands clenched, Thorne's eyes darkened, and Hargrove's smile tightened. Suddenly, a sharp creak echoed from the corridor, followed by the faint rustle of fabric. Poirot spun, his senses alert. But the hallway was empty, the fog swallowing any trace of movement. "Someone listens," he said, his voice low. "Someone who fears the truth." The suspects exchanged wary glances, their alibis fraying like old canvas. As Poirot turned back to the portrait, a chill ran through him. The veiled woman's eyes seemed to shift, as if daring him to unmask her. The game was growing darker, and Poirot knew the next clue could lead to danger, or to the killer's doorstep. Chapter 5. The Forged Masterpiece. Dawn broke over Soho, its pale light filtering through the fog like a tentative brushstroke on a blank canvas. The Atelier Rouge stood resolute, its weathered facade a silent witness to the tragedy within. Inside Victor Beaumont's loft, the air was heavy with the ghosts of turpentine, linseed oil, and that persistent lavender scent that clung to the crime scene like a whispered confession. Hercule Poirot, his compact frame a study in precision, stood before the easel where Beaumont's body lay, the palette knife still embedded in his throat. The unfinished portrait of the veiled woman loomed above, its shadowed features seeming to pulse with secrets, as if daring Poirot to unravel them. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, scanned the studio, his gray cells whirring with the weight of clues gathered, the tampered safe, the lavender-scented glove, the blackmail note, and the damning letters from the attic. The murder was a masterpiece of deception, and Poirot was determined to expose its artist. Inspector Japp, his broad face etched with exhaustion, paced near the safe, his truncheon tapping against his palm. "We're chasing shadows, Poirot," he grumbled, his Cockney accent thick with frustration. "The safe, the knife, that blasted painting, it's all a jumble. I say we arrest the lot and sort it out at the yard." But Poirot, his mustache twitching with quiet dissent, raised a gloved hand. "Non, mon ami. The truth, it is not found in haste. The clues, they form a pattern, like the colors on a canvas. We must see the whole picture." His gaze returned to the portrait, its veiled woman a cipher at the heart of the mystery. Poirot's attention shifted to the painting itself, its surface a battlefield of light and shadow. The woman's face, though indistinct, bore a haunting familiarity, a blend of features that teased his memory. Her eyes, partially obscured, seemed to echo Lydia Voss's fiery intensity. Yet the curve of her jaw suggested Margot Leclerc's delicate strength. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "This is no mere portrait. It is a confession, or perhaps a condemnation." He leaned closer, noting a smudge of vermilion paint still wet. "Old guild mark," he said, his voice low and bitter. "Beaumont used it to mock me, to claim my ideas. But I didn't kill him. I was at the gallery opening, surrounded by witnesses." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Witnesses can be persuaded, monsieur. And your anger, it is a fire that burns too brightly." Thorne's alibi, like Hargrove's telegram, was too convenient.
and Poirot noted the faint tremor in his hands. A sign of guilt, or merely rage? Next, Poirot approached Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, whose polished exterior was beginning to crack under scrutiny. Hargrove stood near a cluttered table, his silver hair glinting under the lamplight, his pinstriped suit a stark contrast to the studio's chaos. "Monsieur Hargrove," Poirot said, producing the receipt marked forgery from Beaumont's desk. "Your name is tied to these forgeries. Were you the victim or the orchestrator?" Hargrove's smile was tight, his eyes darting to the safe. "I was here last night, yes," he admitted, his earlier Paris alibi crumbling. "I came to collect a debt. Beaumont's forgeries were ruining me, but I didn't kill him. A dead artist paints no profits." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, monsieur, your fingerprints were on the safe. Did you seek more than money?" Hargrove's composure faltered, a bead of sweat betraying his nerves. Lydia Voss, her red hair a fiery cascade, lingered near the portrait, her emerald dress catching the light as she twisted her silk handkerchief. "Mademoiselle Voss," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "This lavender scent, it follows you like a shadow. And this glove," he held up the torn fabric from Chapter 2, its scent matching her perfume. "It was found near the body. Yours, perhaps?" Lydia's kohl-rimmed eyes widened, then narrowed. "It's not mine," she said, her voice sharp. "Victor gave me that perfume, but so many use it in Soho. Someone's trying to frame me." Her words were defiant, but her trembling hands told a different story.
Poirot said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Each of you has a motive. Envy, greed, betrayal, love scorned. The clues, the lavender, the blackmail note, the forged painting, the tampered safe, they weave a tapestry of deception." He paused, his eyes scanning their faces. Lydia's breath hitched, Thorne's fists clenched, Hargrove's smile tightened, and Margot's gaze dropped. "But there is more," Poirot continued. "A witness, perhaps, who saw the truth." At that moment, a new figure emerged from the shadows, a young apprentice, Felix Grant, his face pale and his eyes wide with fear. "I saw them all argue with Master Beaumont," he stammered, his voice barely audible. "I was in the back, cleaning brushes." Felix, overlooked until now, was the fifth suspect, his motive murky but present. Beaumont had dismissed him for alleged theft. "He accused me of stealing paints," Felix said, his hands trembling. "But I didn't kill him. I saw someone else that night, a shadow moving toward the roof." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A shadow, Monsieur Grant? Or the killer?" Felix's story introduced doubt, his lavender scent, gifted by Lydia, complicating the web. Poirot's mind raced, connecting the clues, the vermilion smudge, the forged painting, the blackmail note's symbol. The portrait, he realized, was the key, its blended features a clue to a hidden truth. "This woman," he said, pointing to the canvas, "she is a composite, a reflection of those in this room. But whose face did Beaumont paint last?" As the suspects exchanged wary glances, a sudden crash echoed from the rooftop, the same clatter Poirot had heard in Chapter 2. Japp bolted for the stairs, but Poirot raised a hand. "Non, mon ami, it is a distraction." He turned to Felix, his voice low. "You saw this shadow. Describe it." Felix faltered, his eyes darting to Lydia, then away. "It was tall, cloaked. I couldn't see their face." The loft fell silent, the air charged with suspicion. Poirot's gray cells hummed, sensing the killer was close, perhaps too close. A riddle that taunted Poirot's gray cells. The studio was a labyrinth of clues. The tampered safe, the the lavender-scented glove, the blackmail note, the Parisian letter, the vermilion smudge, each a brushstroke in a masterpiece of murder. The suspects, a gallery of motives and alibis, hovered like spectres, their eyes betraying fear, defiance, and hidden truths. Inspector Japp, his face creased with the strain of the long night, leaned against a cluttered table, his notebook open but untouched. "This is getting us nowhere, Poirot," he growled, his Cockney accent sharp with frustration. "We've got a knife, a safe, a painting, and a room full of liars. Let's haul them all to the yard and be done with it." Poirot, his moustache twitching with gentle reproach, raised a gloved hand. "Patience, mon ami. The truth, it is like a delicate sketch. It requires care to reveal its lines. The clues, they are aligning, but we must tread softly." His green eyes flickered to the portrait, its veiled woman a silent witness to the drama unfolding below. The sudden appearance of Felix Grant, the young apprentice, had shifted the investigation's tide. His trembling confession that he had seen a shadowed figure fleeing to the rooftop had introduced a new thread in the tapestry of deceit. Poirot turned to Felix, who stood in the doorway, his pale face framed by dishevelled hair, his eyes wide with fear. "Monsieur Grant," Poirot said, his voice calm but probing, "you say you saw this shadow, this cloaked figure. Yet you also carry the scent of lavender, a gift from Mademoiselle Voss, no?" Felix's hands trembled, his voice barely a whisper. "She gave it to me weeks ago, sir. A token, nothing more. I was cleaning brushes that night, in the back. I heard arguments, Master Beaumont with Miss Lydia, then Mr. Thorne. But I swear I didn't kill him." Poirot's gaze sharpened, noting the boy's nervous fidgeting. "And this shadow, Monsieur Grant, what makes you certain it was not one of these others?" Felix's eyes darted to Lydia, then away. It was twisted her silk handkerchief, betraying her nerves. Poirot leaned closer, his voice soft but unyielding. "And your quarrel with Monsieur Beaumont, it was about another woman, perhaps? The one in this painting?" Lydia's breath hitched, her gaze flickering to the portrait. "He was obsessed with it," she admitted. "He said it would redefine him, but he wouldn't tell me who she was." The interrogation was interrupted by Elias Thorne, who stormed forward, his pigment-stained hands clenched into fists. "Enough of this," he snapped, his voice raw with anger. "That painting is mine, stolen by Beaumont, and now you accuse me because of a guild mark." Poirot produced the blackmail note, its cryptic symbol matching Thorne's tattoo. "Monsieur Thorne, this note demands money from the victim. Your symbol, your motive. Explain." Thorne's eyes darkened, but he held firm. "Beaumont used that mark to taunt me. I threatened him, yes, but I didn't kill him. My alibi holds. Ask the gallery." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Alibis, monsieur, can be bought as easily as paintings." Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, watched from the sidelines, his silver hair glinting like a polished frame. Poirot approached, his tone deceptively mild. "Monsieur Hargrove, your Paris alibi has collapsed, and your name is tied to forgeries in Beaumont's journal. Yet there is more, no?" Poirot's eyes gleamed as he produced a folded document from the safe, uncovered earlier, a contract linking Hargrove to a series of forged paintings. Hargrove's smile tightened, his composure fraying. "Beaumont was forging for me, yes," he confessed, "but under duress. Someone else was pulling the strings, blackmailing him. I was here to collect my due, not to kill him." Poirot's grey cells hummed. "And who, monsieur, was this puppet master?" Margot Leclerc, lingering in her studio doorway, broke her silence. "It was Victor himself," she said, her French accent thick with bitterness. He blackmailed me too, over a past mistake in Paris. He used everyone, me, Hargrove.
Went quiet. Too quiet. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And the shadow, it fled after this silence? Before Felix could answer, a sharp click echoed from the safe, a hidden compartment springing open. Poirot rushed forward, retrieving a small key and a note. Meet me at midnight. No tricks. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the lavender scent clung to it. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. Another piece of the puzzle. As he turned to question Felix further, a sudden thud resounded from the rooftop, a heavy object falling, followed by a muffled cry. Japp bolted for the stairs, but Poirot paused, his senses alert. Non, mon ami, he said. It is a trap. Ignoring Japp's protests, Poirot gathered the suspects. Mes amis, the web tightens. Alliances have formed between lovers, rivals, and schemers. But one of you has woven a deadly thread. He held up the key, watching their reactions. Lydia's eyes widened, Thorne's fists clenched, Hargrove's smile faltered, Margot's gaze dropped, and Felix flinched. Suddenly, a shadow moved in the corridor, a cloaked figure, tall and swift, darting toward the stairs. Japp gave chase, but Poirot remained, his mind racing. The shadow returns, he said, his voice low. But is it the killer, or a witness to their crime? As Japp returned, breathless and empty-handed, a new danger emerged. A faint hiss filled the air, followed by a sharp pain as a poisoned dart whizzed past Poirot, embedding itself in the wall. Mon Dieu! He cried, ducking as the suspects gasped. The dart, tipped with a glistening substance, was a warning or an attempt on his life. The killer grows bold, Poirot said, his eyes scanning the room. But Hercule Poirot, he is bolder still. The loft fell silent, the portrait's veiled woman watching as the game took a deadly turn. Chapter 7. The Poisoned Palette. The Atelier Rouge, shrouded in Soho's relentless fog, seemed to hold its breath as the morning light struggled to pierce the grimy windows of Victor Beaumont's loft. The air was thick with the acrid tang. Gripped his truncheon as he surveyed the dart. "Blimey, Poirot! They're trying to kill you now!" he barked, his Cockney accent thick with urgency. "This isn't just a murder, it's a blooming conspiracy. We need to lock this place down and search every inch." He gestured toward the suspects, who stood frozen, their eyes darting between the dart and Poirot. But Poirot, his moustache twitching with quiet resolve, raised a gloved hand. "Non, mon ami. The killer, they grow desperate. But this dart, it is a clue, not a conclusion. We must use the little grey cells to see beyond the chaos." The loft was a pressure cooker of suspicion, the suspects circling like predators in a shrinking cage. Lydia Voss, her red hair a fiery halo, clutched her silk handkerchief, her kohl-rimmed eyes wide with fear, or perhaps guilt. Elias Thorne, his pigment-stained hands clenched, glared from a corner, his brooding intensity a storm waiting to break. Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, maintained his polished facade, though his silver hair betrayed a faint tremor under the lamplight. Margot Leclerc, the sculptor, lingered in her studio doorway, her clay-dusted hands betraying her calm exterior. And Felix Grant, the young apprentice, stood pale and trembling, his earlier confession of seeing a shadowed figure now tainted by the lavender scent that clung to him. Poirot's mind retraced the night of the murder, reconstructing the sequence of events. Beaumont had argued with Lydia, their voices raised in passion and betrayal. Thorne had confronted him next, accusing him of stealing his artistic vision. Hargrove had arrived, demanding payment for debts tied to forgeries.
Margot, across the hall, had lurked in solitude, her motive rooted in a Parisian betrayal. Felix, the overlooked apprentice, had eavesdropped, his own grievance, dismissal for alleged theft, simmering in the shadows. The clues converged. The lavender scent, shared by Lydia and Felix. The blackmail note's symbol, matching Thorne's tattoo. The forged paintings linked to Hargrove. The clay residue near the...
"Voss," he said, holding up the lavender-scented glove. "This perfume, it is yours, and this glove, it was found near the body. Yet you claim innocence. Tell me, what did you and Monsieur Beaumont argue about?" Lydia's lips trembled, her voice a husky whisper. "He was pulling away," she admitted. "He said the portrait was his future, that I was holding him back. I was angry, yes, but I didn't kill him. I left him alive, I swear." Her eyes darted to Felix, a flicker of something, fear or complicity, passing between them. Poirot noted it, his gray cells humming. Next he confronted Thorne, whose dark eyes burned with resentment. "Monsieur Thorne, your alibi, the gallery opening, it is supported by witnesses, but witnesses can be swayed. This blackmail note, it bears your symbol." Poirot held up the note, its cryptic mark stark against the paper. Thorne's jaw tightened. "Beaumont used that mark to mock me," he said, his voice raw. "I threatened him, yes, but I didn't need to kill him. His own greed was doing that." Poirot's mustache twitched. "And yet, monsieur, your knife was used. Convenient, no?" Thorne's hands clenched, but he said nothing more. Hargrove, ever the polished dealer, stepped forward, his silver hair gleaming. "Monsieur Poirot, you waste time with these artists," he said, his tone clipped. "The forgeries were Beaumont's doing, not mine. I was here to collect my due, nothing more." Poirot's eyes narrowed, holding up the contract from the safe. "And yet, monsieur, your name is entwined with these forgeries. Were you his partner or his victim?" Hargrove's smile faltered, a bead of sweat betraying his nerves. "I was coerced," he said. "Someone else was behind it, someone with more to lose." Poirot filed the admission away, sensing a deeper conspiracy. Margot Leclerc, her dark eyes haunted, spoke before Poirot could question her. "Victor was a monster," she said, her French accent thick with emotion. "He blackmailed me over a mistake in Loft yielded new clues. A vial of lavender perfume in Lydia's purse, a second knife in Thorne's toolkit, and a smudge of curare residue in Margot's studio, hidden among her sculpting tools. Hargrove's coat pocket held a forged receipt, further tying him to the scheme. But the most damning find was a fingerprint on the palette knife, smudged, but one clear print. Hargrove's. "Planted!" Hargrove protested, his composure shattering. "Someone's framing me!" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Perhaps, monsieur, but the truth, it does not lie." As the suspects grew restless, Poirot gathered them before the portrait. "Mes amis," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "The clues converge. The lavender, a shared deception. The knife, accessible to all. The forgeries, a web of greed. The dart, a desperate act. The killer's method is not passion, but precision." He paused, his gaze sweeping over them. Lydia's breath hitched. Thorne's fists clenched. Hargrove's smile vanished. Margot's eyes dropped. And Felix trembled. Suddenly Felix bolted for the door, his footsteps echoing in the loft. Japp lunged, catching him by the collar. "I didn't do it," Felix cried, his voice breaking. "I know who did." The loft fell silent, the portrait's veiled woman watching, as Poirot's gray cells whirred. "Monsieur Grant," he said, his voice low, You flee from guilt or from truth? Felix's eyes darted to the suspects, his fear palpable. The dart, the fingerprints, the shadow, all pointed to a killer growing desperate. As Poirot turned back to the portrait, a chill ran through him. The veiled woman's eyes seemed to accuse, daring him to name the murderer before they struck again. Chapter 8. Unmasked Motives. The Atelier Rouge, steeped in the fog of Soho's restless morning, stood as a crucible of secrets, its walls reverberating with the echoes of Victor Beaumont's murder. The loft's air was heavy with the mingled scents of turpentine, drying oil paint, and the persistent lavender that clung like a specter to the crime scene with it. Felix's eyes, wide with panic, darted among the suspects, who stood frozen in a tableau of suspicion. Lydia Voss, her red hair a fiery cascade, clutched her silk handkerchief, her kohl-rimmed eyes blazing with defiance. Elias Thorne, his pigment-stained hands clenched, glared from a corner, his brooding intensity a storm on the horizon. Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, struggled to maintain his polished facade, his silver hair betraying a faint tremor. Margot Leclerc, the sculptor, hovered in her studio doorway, her clay-dusted hands betraying her calm exterior. Poirot raised a gloved hand, his voice cutting through the tension. "Calm, mon ami. Monsieur Grant, you flee from fear or from guilt? Speak, and let the truth breathe." Felix's voice cracked, barely audible. I saw the killer," he stammered, his eyes flickering to Lydia, then away. "It was after the arguments. I was in the back, cleaning brushes. I heard Master Beaumont shout, then silence. I crept out and saw a figure standing over him, the knife in their hand." He paused, swallowing hard. It was dark, but I saw their silhouette, tall, cloaked, like the shadow I told you about. Poirot's green eyes narrowed, his mustache twitching. "And this figure, Monsieur Grant, you recognize them, no?" Felix hesitated, his gaze darting to the portrait, then back to the suspects. I'm not sure, it was too quick." His words hung in the air, a fragile thread that deepened the mystery. Before Poirot could press further, a sudden blackout plunged the loft into darkness, the gas lamps snuffed out as if by an unseen hand. Gasps and scuffles filled the void, the suspects' voices a chaotic chorus of fear and accusation. "Stay where you are!" Japp shouted, his truncheon raised uselessly in the dark. Poirot, his senses honed, stood still, listening to the rustle of fabric, the creak of floorboards. A slow, sharp cry pierced the darkness, Margot Leclerc's voice, laced with pain. When the lamps flickered back to life, Margot clutched her arm, blood seeping through her. "Madame Leclerc, you were targeted. Why? What do you know that threatens the killer?" Margot's dark eyes, haunted by pain and fear, met his. "Victor. He had a hold over me," she admitted. "In Paris, I forged a sculpture to survive. He found out, used it to control me. But I swear I didn't kill him." Her words echoed the Parisian letter from Chapter 4, but Poirot noted the clay residue on her sleeve, a mirror to the traces near the murder weapon. "Your past, madame. It binds you to the victim," he said. "But does it bind you to his death?" Lydia, her emerald dress catching the lamplight, stepped forward, her voice sharp. "You're wasting time, Monsieur Poirot. Margot's playing the victim, but she had reason to hate Victor. So did Thorne." She pointed at the brooding painter, who snarled in response. "Don't drag me into this, Lydia," Thorne snapped. "You were the one screaming at him that night." Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. "Mes amis, your accusations, they are like brushstrokes on a canvas, vivid but chaotic. Let us seek clarity." He turned to Hargrove, whose polished facade was crumbling. "Monsieur Hargrove, your fingerprint on the palette knife. It is damning, no?" Hargrove's smile vanished, his silver hair glinting as he leaned forward. "Planted," he protested. "Someone's framing me. I was here for my money, nothing more." Poirot held up the forged receipt from Chapter 7. "And yet, monsieur, your name is entwined with Beaumont's forgeries. Were you his partner or his pawn?" Hargrove's eyes darted to the safe where the hidden key had been found. "Someone else was behind it," he said. "Beaumont was blackmailed, forced to forge. I was caught in the middle." Poirot's gray cells whirred, piecing together the clues. The lavender scent, shared by Lydia and Felix, was a common thread, but too common in Soho to be conclusive. The blackmail note's symbol, matching Thorne's tattoo, was a deliberate misdirection. The Carrara
Pointed to the canvas, its blended features a haunting blend of Lydia's eyes and Margot's jaw. "This woman, she is a composite, a reflection of those in this room. But whose hand painted her last?" As the suspects exchanged wary glances, Felix's voice broke the silence. "I saw something else," he whispered, his eyes fixed on the floor. "The shadow. They dropped something near the easel. A vial, maybe." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing to the lavender vial in Lydia's purse. Before he could speak, a faint creak echoed from the corridor, the same sound from Chapter 6, signaling the shadow's return. Japp bolted for the door, but Poirot remained, his gaze fixed on the portrait. "The killer is close," he said, his voice low, "but they fear the light." Suddenly, Lydia lunged toward the portrait, her fingers clawing at its frame. "It's her!" she cried, pointing to Margot. "She's the one he loved!" The accusation hung in the air, a spark in a powder keg. Margot's eyes widened, Thorne's fists clenched, Hargrove's smile vanished, and Felix shrank back. Poirot's gray cells hummed, sensing the truth was near, but so was danger. As he stepped forward to intervene, a shadow flickered in the window, a cloaked figure vanishing into the fog. The game was reaching its climax, and Poirot knew the next move could unmask the killer, or cost him his life. The gray cells converge. The Atelier Rouge, bathed in the pallid light of a Soho afternoon, stood as a silent monument to the unraveling mystery within. The fog outside clung to the windows like a shroud, mirroring the veil of deceit that hung over Victor Beaumont's loft. The air was thick with the acrid tang of turpentine, the musk of drying oil paint, and the persistent lavender scent that wove through the crime scene like a whispered accusation. Hercule Poirot, his compact frame radiating quiet authority, stood before the easel where
Cascade clutched her silk handkerchief, her coal-rimmed eyes blazing with defiance. Elias Thorne, his pigment-stained hands clenched, glared from a corner, his brooding intensity undimmed. Reginald Hargrove, the art dealer, struggled to maintain his polished facade, his silver hair betraying a faint tremor. Margot Leclerc, the sculptor, hovered near her studio doorway, her clay-dusted hands betraying her calm exterior. Felix Grant, the young apprentice, stood, pale and trembling, his earlier confession hanging over him like a storm cloud. Poirot raised a gloved hand, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Mes amis, the hour of truth approaches. The little grey cells, they have worked tirelessly.
piecing together the threads of this crime. The killer is among us, and their mask is slipping. He turned to the portrait, its veiled woman watching like a silent judge. This painting, it is the heart of the mystery, a canvas of betrayal, painted in blood. His green eyes gleamed, his moustache twitching, as he began to unravel the clues. He started with the lavender scent, a thread that had teased his senses from the beginning. The lavender, it is shared by Mademoiselle Voss and Monsieur Grant, he said, holding up the vial from Lydia's purse and the glove from Chapter 2. But it is common in Soho, a scent used by many, including the victim himself. A red herring, perhaps, to distract us. Lydia's breath hitched, her eyes narrowing, but she said nothing. Felix shrank back, his fear palpable. Next, Poirot addressed the blackmail note, its cryptic symbol matching Thorne's tattoo. Monsieur Thorne, you claimed this was an old guild mark, used by Beaumont to mock you, he said, producing the note from Chapter 2. But the handwriting, it is not Beaumont's. It is a forgery, meant to implicate you. Thorne's fists clenched, his voice raw. I told you, I didn't write it. Someone's framing me. Poirot nodded, his gaze steady. Indeed, monsieur. The note, it is a distraction, but it reveals the killer's cunning. He turned to Hargrove, whose fingerprint on the palette knife had
Red herring? Or a clue? Margot's dark eyes flashed, her French accent thick. I told you, Victor blackmailed me, but I didn't kill him. My art is my vengeance. Poirot noted her trembling hands, sensing truth but also fear. The will, discovered in Chapter 8, was the pivot. This document, Poirot said, holding up the crumpled paper, names Mademoiselle Voss as heir, but with codicils for Monsieur Thorne, Monsieur Hargrove, and Madame Leclerc. Wealth. It is a motive that binds you all. He paused, his gaze sweeping over them. But the portrait, it tells a deeper story. He pointed to the canvas, its vermilion smudge a vibrant clue. The eyes, they are Mademoiselle Voss's, fiery and passionate. Yet the jaw, it is Madame Leclerc's, delicate and strong. This is no mere portrait. It is a confession of love and betrayal. Poirot's voice grew sharp, his gray cells converging. The deduction, it is clear. The lavender, a shared scent, is irrelevant. The blackmail note, forged by the killer to implicate Monsieur Thorne. The fingerprint, planted to accuse Monsieur Hargrove. The clay, a natural residue in Madame Leclerc's work. The will, a motive for all, but not the key. The true motive is love, betrayed, twisted, and deadly. He turned to Lydia, his eyes piercing. Mademoiselle Voss, you loved Beaumont, but he loved another, Madame Leclerc. You discovered their affair, no? The portrait, it is a composite of you both, a taunt to your heart. Lydia's face paled, her kohl-rimmed eyes widening. You're wrong, she cried, her voice breaking. I loved him, yes, but I didn't kill him. Poirot stepped closer, his voice relentless. The knife, it came from Monsieur Thorne's toolkit, accessible to all. The wound, precise, struck in a moment of passion, during an embrace perhaps, when Beaumont turned from you to her. He pointed to Margot, whose hands clenched, her eyes haunted. You stabbed him, Mademoiselle Voss, using the knife to frame Monsieur Thorne, planting.
Chose her, but a final twist emerged. Felix, trembling, spoke up. She wasn't alone, he said, his voice barely audible. I saw someone else, helping her move the body, planting clues. Poirot's eyes gleamed, turning to the suspects. An accomplice, perhaps, he said, his gaze sweeping over Thorne, Hargrove, and Margot. The air crackled with tension, the portrait's veiled woman watching as the truth teetered on the edge of revelation.
"The game, it is not over," Poirot murmured, sensing another shadow in the fog, waiting to strike. Chapter 10. Resolution in Vermilion. The Atelier Rouge, bathed in the wan light of a Soho afternoon, stood as a solemn witness to the denouement of Victor Beaumont's murder. The fog outside had begun to lift, revealing glimpses of the cobblestone streets below, as if the city itself were exhaling a long-held breath. Inside the loft, the air was heavy with the fading scents of turpentine, oil paint, and the persistent lavender that had haunted the investigation like a ghostly refrain. Hercule Poirot, his compact frame a beacon of clarity amid the chaos, stood before the easel where Beaumont's body lay, the palette knife a stark relic of the crime. The unfinished portrait of the veiled woman loomed above, its shadowed features no longer a mystery, but a testament to the truth Poirot's grey cells had uncovered. The clues, the tampered safe, the lavender-scented glove, the blackmail note, the Parisian letter, the vermilion smudge, the curare-tipped dart, the damning fingerprint, the will, and Felix's whispered hint of an accomplice, had woven a tapestry of deception. And now Poirot was ready to reveal its final threads. Inspector Japp, his broad face a mix of relief and impatience, stood beside Poirot, his notebook clutched tightly. "You've got her, Poirot," he said, his Cockney accent thick with certainty. "Lydia Voss, the killer, caught by that painting's trick. But what's this about an accomplice? Let's wrap this up and get them to the yard." He gestured toward Lydia, who stood trembling, her red hair dishevelled, her— "Mademoiselle Voss, you have confessed, but not fully. The murder, it was no accident of passion. The knife, taken from Monsieur Thorne's toolkit, was chosen with care. The lavender glove, planted to mislead. The blackmail note, forged to implicate. You wove a web of deception, but you did not act alone, no?" Felix Grant, the young apprentice, flinched, his pale face glistening with sweat. His earlier claim of seeing a shadow, an accomplice helping Lydia move the body, hung in the air like a storm cloud. Poirot turned to him, his voice gentle but relentless. "Monsieur Grant, you saw more than you say. The shadow, the accomplice, who was it?" Felix's eyes darted to the floor, then to Lydia, his voice barely audible. I lied about the shadow. I was scared. I didn't see anyone else." His words faltered, and Poirot's mustache twitched, sensing a half-truth. "Scared, monsieur? Or complicit?" Poirot gathered the suspects before the portrait, its veiled woman a silent arbiter of justice. "Mes amis," he said, his voice resonant with authority, "let us review the canvas of this crime. The lavender, a common scent, was a distraction, shared by Mademoiselle Voss and Monsieur Grant, but meaningless. The blackmail note, with Monsieur Thorne's guild mark, was forged by Mademoiselle Voss to point to him. The fingerprint on the knife, Monsieur Hargrove's, was planted. Gloves were worn, but his touch from days prior remained. The clay residue, Madame Leclerc's, was natural to her work. Another red herring. The will, naming Mademoiselle Voss as heir, provided motive, but it was love, betrayed love, that drove the knife. He pointed to the portrait, its vermilion smudge a vibrant clue. This painting, it is the key. The eyes, they are Mademoiselle Voss's, painted first in passion, but the jaw, Madame Leclerc's, added last in a final act of devotion by Beaumont. The vermilion smudge, fresh before the murder, was his dying message, accusing his killer. Lydia's tears fell freely now, her voice a broken whisper. His voice cracking. "No, sir, I swear, I only saw her after. She was crying, standing over him. I kept quiet because I was scared she'd blame me." Poirot's eyes gleamed, sensing the truth. You are innocent, Monsieur Grant, but not blameless. Your silence aided her deception. Thorne, his brooding intensity undimmed, stepped forward, his voice raw. So it's Lydia, then. She used my knife, my symbol, to frame me. Poirot nodded. Oui, Monsieur Thorne. Your rivalry was her opportunity. Hargrove, his polished facade shattered, added, And my fingerprint? She planted it, knowing I'd handled the tools. Poirot's mustache twitched. Precisely, monsieur. The killer. She is cunning, but not infallible. Jap, his patience exhausted, stepped forward. Right, Poirot. Let's take her in. Lydia Voss, you're under arrest for the murder of Victor Beaumont. He produced handcuffs, but Lydia, her defiance gone, sank deeper into the chaise, sobbing. I didn't mean for it to happen, she whispered. I loved him, and he broke me. Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. Love, mademoiselle, can be a poison as deadly as curare. You struck in a moment of passion, but your actions afterward, the glove, the note, the misdirection, were calculated. The loft fell silent, the weight of justice settling like dust. Poirot turned to the portrait one last time, its veiled woman no longer a mystery, but a mirror of betrayal. The gray cells, they see through deception, he said, his voice low. The wound's angle, precise and intimate, suggests an embrace, a lover's quarrel turned deadly. The painting, it was Beaumont's final stroke, accusing his killer in vermilion. He paused, his eyes sweeping over the suspects. There is no accomplice, mes amis. Mademoiselle Voss acted alone. Her jealousy, the brush that painted this tragedy. Jap led Lydia away, her sobs echoing in the loft, as the other suspects dispersed, their motives and secrets laid bare. Thorne, his